Japanese bikes are supposed to be reliable. That's the general consensus, right? You buy a Honda so you can abuse it without consequence. You buy an old Suzuki because you need it to survive an apocalypse. You buy a Kawasaki because you prefer the company of men. No, wait, that's BMW. Either way, meanwhile, European brands were always seen as the exciting yet troublesome alternative. Fast, exotic, and emotionally engaging, but let's be honest, a bit of a strain on your wallet and mental health. Sounds like that time a buddy of mine dated a girl with pink hair. But that's a story for another day. Over the decade, the tides have been shifting. Have you started to realize that Japanese bikes aren't quite as bulletproof as they used to be? They're becoming more complex, more reliant on tech, and more likely to suffer from cost-cutting and global manufacturing. At the exact same time, European bikes are becoming more reliable than ever. But no one seems to be talking about this. Almost as if they're judging motorcycles by the reputations they earned 20 years ago, not by what's being made today. Perhaps that's more of an indictment on the age of the average commenter, guys in their 50s and 60s. So, why are Japanese bikes not as reliable as they used to be? Let's get into it. Japanese bikes didn't become reliable because Soichiro Honda unearthed some kind of like ancient alien tech buried at the top of Mount Fuji. It's a far simpler but a little bit more boring story. Japanese bikes were reliable because they were built on conservatism. They didn't change core components until they absolutely had to. They built engines that were simultaneously powerful yet understressed. They used proven platforms and kept bikes in production for so long that every small issue had already been ironed out. And there was endless social proof to back it up. You knew that by the time you bought a 12-year-old SV650 off of Facebook Marketplace for $3,000 from some dude named Chet, that every potential problem had long been solved. But beyond the SV650, there's endless platforms that have earned meme-level reliability. The Suzuki DRZ400, the Kawasaki KLR650, the Honda Goldwing, for God's sake. What do these bikes all have in common? They're old. Platforms dating back 25, 40, maybe even 50 years. Practically all of Suzuki's current lineup dates back to the mid-2000s. And given there are still countless Suzuki stands out there talking about K5 Gixxers and 3x3 DRZ airbox mods, this strategy seems to work. They're like that small town time capsule bowling alley that feels like stepping back in time. Yeah, it's not as flashy as Dave and Buster's, but Timmy is still gonna have an awesome 9th birthday party. Just make sure you wash your shoes afterwards. Why are those floors so sticky there? Even Yamaha's most famed engine platforms are kind of long in the tooth now. The CP2, CP3, and CP4 power plants were nothing short of world class for a long time. But today, they're starting to feel a little bit more like heirloom products than new innovations. Yet, the reputation endures. Nearly every rider knows you can buy an MT-07 with 4 previous owners and a bald rear tire, and it's not going to skip a beat. It's a bike that's been tortured by every sort of hooligan and lives to tell the tale. That reputation has essentially become gospel. While Japanese brands have been coasting on decades of old R&D yet being praised as built to last, European brands like Triumph, Ducati, and KTM were built on a different philosophy. They iterated quickly, chased that last 10% of potential performance, and demanded frequent maintenance to stay alive. They built some of the most exciting motorcycles of all time, but owning them always required tolerance for risk. You couldn't just buy a hand-built Ducati superbike and not expect some gremlins. But that's the thing. That was decades ago at this point. This is when these myths were born. This is when the stereotypes and oversimplifications became so commonplace. Japanese bikes earned their reputation during an entirely different era than we see today. An era where simplicity and over-engineering were still possible. Most of the bikes people think of when they think of Japanese reliability are old platforms or motorcycles designed using old philosophies. Honda's NC750 uses a parallel twin that is essentially half of an inline-4 car engine. When it first came out, it redlined at 6,500 RPM. That's absolutely insane in the sense that it revs so low. Reliable? Sure, but at what cost? Today, people demand more out of their motorcycles. European brands are as reliable as they've ever been, and Japanese manufacturers face new pressure from competition, regulations, and globalization. The reality of reliability starts to defy the myth. Japanese manufacturers are not building motorcycles under the same conditions that they were 20 or 30 years ago. The entire industry has changed. Regulations are stricter, consumers are demanding way more, and manufacturers and production costs are much higher. Competition's also much stronger. Like, do you think Honda would be where they are today if they had to contend with not just the rest of the big four, but also CF Moto during their current rise to power? I don't think anyone had competitive Chinese motorcycles on their bingo card back in 1999. Essentially, you just can't build a motorcycle like it's 2000 while trying to survive in the 2026 market. Well, I guess Suzuki can, but I think even the most loud-mouthed Suzuki fans are nearing their limits. Technology is a double-edged sword for motorcycle manufacturers. On one side, consumers seem to demand it. They want a TFT display with more menus than the tablet you order on at Chili's. They want all the IMU-powered safety systems, but they also want a Japanese motorcycle to be as simple and reliable as they were in 2005. And unfortunately, tech is not built to last the way your nuts and bolts are. Your Honda Fireblade is not going to be as reliable as your grandpa's CB750 was. It's just impossible. While some complexity is for safety or convenience, some is mandatory for emissions. Emissions regulations get stricter every year, so do noise restrictions. Yet manufacturers want to keep squeezing out more power. This necessitates more sensors, bigger catalysts, more complex electronically controlled fueling, and eventually more failure points. Meanwhile, riders on Reddit somehow expect all of this while also demanding a bike cost the same as it did 20 years ago. Japanese manufacturers are being forced to cut costs as well in ways that were less of a concern in the past. Back when Japanese bikes totally dominated the market as a default choice, they had a calm confidence. Now they are facing pressure from directions unimaginable 20 years ago. European brands are way better now. Ducatis have service intervals that would be unimaginable to the Y2K Ducatisti. The Multistrada V4 calls for oil changes every 9,000 miles and valve checks every 37,000 miles. That's insane. You can now own a Ducati V4 that needs oil changes less frequently than their Desmo engines needed valve adjustments. Triumph's going further and further into Japanese territory too, with value-driven 400s and more streetable, easy-to-live-with middleweights like the Trident 660 or 800. Plus, your chances of dealing with notorious Triumph electrical problems have been the lowest they've ever been. Not to mention the Chinese competition. Like I mentioned, there's no way the Big Four could have anticipated this decades ago. CF Moto is actively breaking the motorcycle market. Aimed at young, value-driven, nihilistic riders, these CF Motos match Japanese bikes on performance while beating them on features, tech, and price. And just as an anecdote, I've been seeing more and more CF Motos just rolling around than I have Japanese bikes here. If a black-pilled Zoomer doesn't have enough optimism to imagine 2030, why should they buy a motorcycle strictly for reliability? They want tech, value, and financing deals attractive enough to lure in a 22-year-old with a 400 credit score and stage 4 brain rot. They're here for a good time, not a long time. Have you ever taken your bike out and thought, why is it behaving terribly? It's slow to turn in, your brakes don't feel as effective, and your bike is kind of just squirming beneath you. Well, it's because your tires are underinflated. Staying on top of your PSI is not just for hardcore track guys or canyon carving chads. Every rider should be checking their tire pressure frequently. And if we're being honest, there is no shortage of mobile inflators available online. Personally, Fantic is my favorite. I know this is an advertisement, but really I love these little units. The X10 Pro is a small yet powerful little thing. Topping up your motorcycle tires just takes a few seconds. You set the PSI, turn it on, and it stops automatically when it hits the desired pressure. The battery lasts forever too. I use this thing on my motorcycles, my road bike, and even to top up my wife's car. And honestly, I don't remember the last time I charged it. Although I probably should, since I use this inflator so frequently. I would be devastated if the battery died on a day I really needed it. What's the alternative? Go to a gas station? I think they charge for air now anyway, so that's crazy. You deserve better than that. That's why Fantic is celebrating their 6-year anniversary and giving everyone 30% off so you can get an X10 Pro for yourself. That is a great deal. Click the link in the description and the discount will automatically be applied. Don't miss this one. It's a really sweet little thing. Thanks to Fantic for the support. Now let's get back to the show. Now they say pressure makes diamonds, but lately for the Big Four, it seems to result in recalls. The modern world doesn't allow for the decades-long slow iterations the Japanese brands have relied on for so long. I mean, think of Toyota's Kaizen systems. When the pressure mounts, the cracks start to appear, and Kawasaki has been dealing with bottom-end crankshaft issues on ZX6Rs across the last 4 model years. 17,000 motorcycles were recalled initially, and another 20,301 were recalled after that. That feels completely unthinkable for Kawasaki, especially given that they've been printing out ZX6Rs for years. 12,500 CB1000 Hornet SPs were recalled for fuel leaks. All units sold in Europe and the UK were recalled due to oil consumption issues resulting from out-of-spec piston rings. I believe the oil consumption issue is the reason the Neo Retro version, the CB1000F, has been delayed for US arrival. Yamaha had to recall all of their 2022 to 2023 CP3 models due to ECU issues, and Suzuki, well, I guess since 90% of their lineup was developed in 2000, they don't have as many widespread or serious issues. But anecdotally, someone on our Discord server has a GSX 8R whose TFT dash just outright failed. You know how much a replacement unit costs from Suzuki? $1,700. You know what probably wouldn't fail? An analog speedometer. And look, these are not KTM levels of manufacturing defect. It's not camshafts made out of cheese. But still, for the Big Four, it's a little outside of the normal, no? It's almost as if Japanese bikes are not as flawless by default anymore, because the environment that created the classic reliable Japanese bike just doesn't exist anymore. Alright, at this point we need to separate two things: the actual reliability of Japanese motorcycles and the mythology surrounding them, because honestly, those things are not the same thing anymore, and I feel like I'm living in crazy land nowadays. Japanese bikes are still generally reliable overall, probably still more reliable than most European alternatives. Of course, there will always be outliers on either side. People love dropping anecdotes in the comments about how their buddy's Aprilia or Ducati blew up in the first 1,000 miles, or I guess that would be KTM nowadays. But generally, this basically still reigns true. But the mythical, untouchable, buy it for life reputation they carry today was built during an entirely different era of motorcycling. If you want a motorcycle that will run forever, you already know what I'm going to say. It's a simple, air-cooled, carbureted dual sport. That's going to be your only option. Everything else will eventually decompose in one way or another. The myth of reliability comes from the cultural momentum. Every older rider has some story about an indestructible Japanese motorcycle. Take the Honda Magna guy, for example. He only rides Honda Magnas. He only hangs out with guys who ride Honda Magnas. That is the be-all, end-all motorcycle for him. Then there's all those VFR guys that are the same way. Or your uncle who talks about how winterization is fake news because he used to just roll a CB750 into the garage, throw a sheet over it, and then it would start on the first kick 5 months later. Ah yes, the good old days of ethanol-free gas. These bikes have become folklore, and since every motorcyclist can't experience every motorcycle on Earth long enough to test its durability, our understanding gets passed down through stories, anecdotes, and composite averages, and to be honest, a little bit of survivor bias. But the oral tradition is dated. These stories haven't really caught up to reality, as more people's Hondas are starting to burn oil, or more TFT displays have the blue screen of death. The mythology might start changing. We hold Japanese motorcycles to a totally different standard than everybody else. If your KTM throws an error code or has an electrical fault, KTM owners just shrug and say, yep, that's just KTM stuff. Good thing I have my orange Power Parts code reader ready. But if a Honda or a Kawasaki has a problem, people react like the Pope was caught at the male strip club. Because Japanese reliability is so ingrained in motorcycling culture, and hell, even in culture in general, that minor issues feel like a shocking betrayal. And it's all pretty ironic because modern motorcycles are generally better than they've ever been. Old motorcycles were simple and easy to keep running forever, but they also kinda sucked. I've ridden plenty of old bikes to know this. Carburetor jets clogged, gaskets leaked, electrical systems were more primitive than the color-changing LED smart lights you have behind the computer monitor in your goon cave. And the brakes just straight up didn't work half the time. So yeah, an old Honda was more reliable than an old Triumph, but it wouldn't hold a candle to an average motorcycle today. I think the biggest question is, what happens 15 to 20 years from now? Nobody actually knows how this tech will age long term. And if we're basing our assumptions on computers, TVs, or smartphones, it will likely age poorly. What happens when the engine on your Goldwing still runs perfectly, but the ECU is bricked or the radar cruise control module costs $4,000 to replace? Old Japanese reliability came from simplicity and over-engineering. Modern motorcycles are better, but they're built with complexity and optimized under the pressure of global competition. Maybe everything's gonna work out. Or maybe Japanese bikes will be fully and fine the way so many other things have been. Maybe in the future, motorcycling will be reduced to two factions: Chinese Sur-Ron clones or air-cooled dual-sport Japanese bikes. What side will you be fighting for in the end times? So what do you guys think? Are Japanese brands really falling off, or is reality just finally catching up to the myth? Do you have a ZX6 with a blown out bottom end? Let me know in the comments down below. And thanks for making it all the way to the end of the video. I will catch you in the next one.